Welcome to Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose. A deep transformation coming for the Space Force, according to the Secretary of the Air Force. That transformation's necessary because of China's priority in space. Frank Kendall is the 26th Secretary of the Air Force. Frank, welcome. Thanks very much for joining me today. Your theme recently at the Space Symposium was space transformation. Why is that the most important message that you're trying to convey to that audience, at least right now?
The analogy I make, Francis, is that the U.S. has a Space Force which is somewhat as if a nation had a merchant marine and woke up one day and decided it needed a Navy. We have to really move to a totally different concept for national security use of space. The reason for that is simple. We're threatened now in a way that we haven't been before. So we have to be much more resilient. We also have to be able to protect our terrestrial assets, the rest of the joint force, from threats from space, particularly targeting centers by other nations.
What does that mean for what General Brown and General Saltzman need to do with their individual services and then keeping them knit together as they are right now?
Well, we have to knit all the joint force together. Space is a huge part of that because space communications are going to become an increasingly important part of our military communications overall. So integrating both the Air Force, the Navy, and the Air Force and the Marine Corps all together through space-based capabilities is really one of the things that the Space Force has to provide.
It is budget season, of course, in Washington. You're very active this time of year on Capitol Hill, and I quote again from Breaking Defense about the Space Symposium. Secretary Kendall noted the Department of the Air Force alone has 12 new starts that it's been waiting to initiate for over a year, a delay caused by the use of continuing resolutions. How is that holding you back from the capabilities that you need that you just described, Frank?
We're in a race for technological superiority, military technological superiority, particularly with China. And I'm now in a position of, I used this morning, if you know the movie Casablanca, where the refugees come to Casablanca and wait and wait and wait, I'm waiting. What I'm waiting for is money. We did the work the first year I was in office to define the things we need to do. We were able, over the past year, to get that into the Defense Department's budget and up to Capitol Hill. Now we're waiting for the Hill to act. I have an initiative that would allow us to start much more quickly, which I hope the Congress will look at favorably. But in the meantime, we've got 12 new starts that are in the budget that I can't really get started with until Congress acts. A continuing resolution won't solve that problem. I need actual authorization as well as funding. So we're in a mode of trying to make that case to ensure if we do have a continuing resolution, at least that it's a short one and not something that carries on into the next year terribly far.
How would that initiative work? What would you be able to do that you can't do now as far as trying to get a head start on some of these programs?
The initiative is something I've been arguing for decades. It would give us limited authority to initiate programs before formal authorization. And we would confine our activities to early stage activities, maintain competition, we'd notify the Congress, we wouldn't go past preliminary design review, one of the very early milestones. But it would allow us to shave up to 2 years, a year and a half nominally, a year certainly, off of our lead time to fielding capabilities. It would be an enormous advantage to be able to do that and correct a period of time right now which essentially goes by while, as I am today, you wait for funding.
Are there other things that you can do, maybe informed by your experience as AT&L, to try to drive change in the acquisition program? Because every single uniformed person that I talk to talks about speed and the need to get these capabilities in the hands of warfighters faster.
The guidance I've given to my acquisition people is structure programs to get meaningful military capability as quickly as possible. I'm not that interested in experiments or one of a type or a couple of prototypes. I want to get to production and get to meaningful quantities. And so our programs are being structured to make that happen.
You are getting, you're making progress in some of these areas. What do you need to happen next? Who needs to do what, and particularly in Congress, who needs to do what to give you what you need?
Basically, we need to pass both authorization bills and the budget and the appropriations. We've had hearings before the appropriators. I think those went very well. We have our first authorization hearing later this week and then another one next week. I'm just looking for timely action from the Congress. It's been years since we did not have a continuing resolution. That would be ideal, would be to act on time and do what the Congress's role is and fulfill that responsibility.
Regarding this idea to be able to get head starts as you've described, any sense yet from Capitol Hill about which way they might lean? Is this something that you're getting a potential thumbs up on at least?
I think there is an appreciation of the need to move quickly, and this is a way to do that, which is, I call it low-hanging fruit. There's very little penalty. Congress does give up a little bit of control, but not very much. And it allows us to gain quite a substantial amount of time that we wouldn't have otherwise. So I think that's the short answer to your question is I've had generally favorable responses, and hopefully we'll be able to make the case.
When you make that case, what are the things that speak to the concerns that the members have that they want to make sure they have in place so that you can give them those assurances?
I think they don't want a long-term commitment. They want us to kind of keep it reasonable and give them a chance to interact and review and decide whether they would let us continue or not. And I think that's a reasonable thing to ask for.
A lot of discussion about what the composition of the force is, what the programs are, programs of record, and so on. What do you need equipment-wise? What's in the budget that you're particularly advocating for on the Hill?
Well, the new space systems that we talked about, more resilient capabilities, counter space capabilities. One of the new starts is an uncrewed collaborative combat aircraft. Essentially an uncrewed aircraft that accompanies a manned aircraft which is its controller, maybe 3 or 4 of those uncrewed collaborative combat aircraft, all controlled like a play caller basically in the manned aircraft. And then they operate together as a formation. That's something that we're headed towards production in meaningful quantities. I've talked about 1,000 as a reasonable planning number to start with. Getting that one started and moving it forward, I think, is one of the imperatives that we have.
What does the future look like in that respect? Because I think it was maybe just 3, 4, 5 years ago, people talked about drone swarms, particularly in the Air Force, and it seemed like it was something that was far away. The way you're describing it, it's here today.
And one of the things that I noted when I was out of government with this is that there was a lot of progress in relevant technologies. There was a DARPA ACE program, there was the Loyal Wingman program that Australia did with Boeing, the Skyborg program that the Air Force did, and some work that the Navy did as well on their carrier-based uncrewed combat aircraft. So the technology, I think, is there to support it. I had my scientific advisory board take a look at this just to confirm that my intuition was correct. And they came back and agreed that after an extensive review that the technology is ready and we can set reasonable requirements and have a good expectation of meeting them.
You and I have talked about requirements 1,000 times in the last 10 years, if we've talked about it once. What are you able to do now as the Secretary to set reasonable requirements for the programs, not just that are in progress now, but that you're just starting on today?
That's a great question. The work that I did the first year I was in office was under the rubric of operational imperatives. These were 7 problems that we had to solve operationally. Each of the teams that was attacking those problems was co-led by an operator and an acquisition or a technology person. And that brought those people together to define reasonable, achievable requirements that would take advantage of the technology that was available, but not be an overreach and impossible to meet. So I think that's led to a sound set of recommendations for these 12 new starts that I talked about earlier.
Is that something that you devised as AT&L? Is that something that you borrowed from one of the other services, authored new for the Air Force, some combination of all of those things?
Some combination of the last 50 years of experience. I'm not sure what the exact parts were, but I've seen it done wrong a few times, and I think that's given me some idea about how to do it right.
We have about a minute left, Mr. Secretary. What's different about being the Secretary of a service compared to being in OSD as you were the last time you were in government?
The relationship between service secretaries and their service chiefs is a unique management relationship. I've been very, very lucky to have General Brown, General Raymond, and now General Saltzman as my partners essentially in leading the Department of the Air Force. I think we've been able to make an enormous amount of progress together. My mantra has been one team, one fight. And that applies very broadly, but it particularly applies within the Department of the Air Force. We operate the headquarters as one entity. There's a service staff for the Air Force and the Space Force as well as the Secretariat, but we all work together with a common set of goals. And I've been really delighted with the cooperation I've had. The other thing that's unique, I think, about this job compared to what I did before is it's a line job as opposed to a staff job. And I think that's given me a lot more latitude to make positive change and move forward.
Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for your time. It's great to have you on the program today.
Great to be back, Princess. Thank you.
You can read more about the Air Force and Space Force at fedgovtoday.com. Coming next, kicking your industry's digital transformation into overdrive and measuring for success. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.